Good afternoon, everyone. After wheat soaring the most on record with this freakish cyclonic blizzard that ripped across the central United States, beef prices rising, the highest, the fastest ever recorded, absolute vertical increases in price. That is for live cattle and feeder cattle both. Limit up, stop trades. This follows right on the heels of wheat soaring the most on record as well last week. Kansas Wheat Commission says they lost the crop. Nobody's talking about oats. They're up as well. Taking a look at the winter wonderland across the grain belt in the United States, they went out to do an assessment. And the first day of the Kansas wheat tour, muddy fields and snow. Second day, they couldn't even get out the first 100 miles of Colby, Kansas because of snow. This is a time for you to jump over to Trade Genius and talk to Bob Kudla. He and I have been conversing about this for about 2 years. We saw this as the signal of the increase in the intensity, and we were looking for this exact event. This is the first of many to come. If you were holding long on this, you just made a fortune. And while you're watching the video, please remember to subscribe to Adapt 2030. Satellite image here of the vortex blizzard that ripped across the Midwest United States grain growing belt last week. Wheat soaring the most on record. And now today, beef prices soar after the same blizzard clobbers the Midwest. This was a record surge in cattle's futures. The prices jumped so fast, so high, that they stopped trading, limit up. And at the CME, cattle futures for live cattle were up as well as feeder cattle, so both. It just means anything that you're going to buy meat-based is going to be up in price. Looking at live cattle, feeder cattle as well. And then we look right back a few days ago, wheat soaring the most on record after that freak snowstorm. And you really need to ask yourself, if the world has such a glut of grains, how can the possible world price rise 8% in 3 days just on a single storm in the United States, taking out a few states' wheat production? And remember, it wasn't just the cold that took out the wheat crop that was taller than normal because of the warmer spring, and then when the winds came along, it damaged the stalks. Once the stalks are bent over, those nutrients can't go to the head, and it's a lost crop. Bit wider out here for you. Conditions in the fields on May 1st, a couple days back, they knew there was going to be substantial damage. But what nobody's really talking about are the oat price increases. As you can see, substantial gains as well on oats. Red wheat prices up, tapering off a bit. Wheat, spring wheat, all up. So that means everything you buy, give it about a 3 to 4 week lag, and everything you buy in the supermarket is going to be more noticeably expensive. You're not just going to wander in and go, oh, it's a few cents more expensive. No, it's going to be like 20% higher or more. And those of you who have fund managers out there, you really need to check with them. There were a record number of shorts out on all the ag-based commodities. If they were trading anything ag on a short, they just got clobbered. I mean, that was a wipeout of asset gain in these prices. If they were going long, though, you just made enormous gains. Because when the Kansas Wheat Commission comes out and says, we lost the western Kansas wheat crop this weekend, that's a pretty bold statement. Kansas grows every 1 out of 5 bushels in the United States. They're looking at a minimum 60 million out of that 467 million at the bare minimum right now. So conditions were like this, whited out in the fields, and then afterward they were able to see a kilometer or two. This is what was left in the snow cake. Interesting kind of formations in the snow, by the way, on that. Anywhere in that darker blue shade on the west was pretty much 100% loss there. So what they did was they went out to take an account, and they call it the wheat tour, the Kansas wheat tour. So they're going out with these government officials, agronomists, and they're trying to get a gauge of how much wheat was lost. The Wheat Quality Control Council is also involved in this. Well, the first day they went out, they were bogged down in soggy, muddy fields, and then the snow was a hindrance as well. They right away, just even what they saw from the roads, lowered down to 43 bushels per acre. Now, I know bushels and tons. We still trade in tons, but still, bear with me. We're using bushels here. You know, even on this first day, they were unable to actually get into the fields because there were snow drifts along the roads and had 22 inches of snow falling. Power lines were down all over the place. It was just a mess. Then they had forward scouts itself looking for fields and damage. They have assessed that worsening conditions and southern counties in Oklahoma are also going to be added into these damage totals. A thing to keep in mind, they still say again and again in these articles that I followed, it's going to take a couple of weeks to get the full assessment. First, they need to let everything melt, and then they need to take an assessment once they can get out there into the fields. And as you know as well as I do, the government officials always put these rosy figures out. So if they're saying 50 million bushels lost, it's probably 3 times that much. Prices surging 6.5% in just a single day. And then they go out on day 2 of the Kansas wheat tour. They saw extensive frost damage, broken stems. Now here's the thing, they couldn't even get into these fields for the first 100 miles circumference around Colby, Kansas because of snow. There's really that much, 100 square miles that they're not even able to assess yet because it's still covered in snow, and they're trying to say, oh, it's only 50 million bushels lost. And then I love that last sentence. The agronomist says, it's unlikely the yields will be as high as the tour participants forecast. Of course, I'm going to believe an agronomist over an economist or a government official. Are you kidding me? Broken stems, exactly what they're talking about. I picked up a few of the flooding stories as well. Corn in Monroe City, Missouri. They're only partially planted, but they're waiting for dry out in the fields. You can see some flooding there, as well as Nebraska. They're still trying to get through the flooding. This is the first losses of the mini ice age based on an out-of-season storm in one country, in one area of a country, in a couple of different crops. This pushed the world price on agriculture. How can one storm do that? Wait for the amazing fruit price rises as well when Europe's not able to export that much this year, and also the entire eastern United States with that late freeze that killed off all the buds that were out. There's going to be very little fruit available this year. It'll all be exported from Asia, and it's probably going to be double or triple price from what you're used to paying. Welcome to the new grand solar minimum. And as the economy starts collapsing around in other areas, like we already seen the subprime mortgage bubble crashing in Canada already. This is just straight up a repeat of 2008 with the subprime in the U.S. It's just starting in Canada now. You're going to need to be thinking about trying to have other investment plays. Trade Genius, Bob is so well versed on the losses of the mini ice age, which we expect going forward. Which places on the planet? Of course, the United States is one. We're going to be looking also in northern China, the Ural Mountains and the Ukraine. So these are the next 3 hotspots to look for losses.